Hey guys, this is Brad Billings, current Grand Master of the Grand Lodge of Texas, sitting here with Jeremy Johnson, the self-proclaimed data scientist of the Grand Lodge of Texas, although I assure you that position does not exist. A little bit about how you came up with that title.
So I went to Penn State for graduate school. I have a degree in statistics from there, and then I also work as a data scientist and a pricing expert for a pharmaceutical company.
All right, so you know a little bit about this subject.
A little bit.
And I've asked you specifically this time to dig into one of the hot topics in our jurisdiction, and I'm sure several other jurisdictions, has been for many years, endowments. Maybe just start with some general thoughts on endowments.
So endowments are overall good for the lodge. They will continue to provide money for the lodges for many years to come, as long as the endowment fund stays solvent, which our money managers ensure continues to happen and continues to grow in value, not only just stay balanced, but continues to grow. The lodges will continue to make money based on their endowment funds. It's a delicate mix of how much money you have in there. If the lodge doesn't have a whole lot of endowed funds, they're not going to make a lot of money. If the lodge has a lot of endowed funds, they're going to make a lot of money every year.
Okay. So just in general, you pulled some of the data. I see it here in front of us. Just for the overall endowment fund, can you start with just kind of a general overview for Texas specifically?
Yep. So we started this program in 1980. You could buy an endowment. At that time, the prices were set statewide, so they were all the same. And from that point on, we changed the law in the early 2010s to allow the lodges to set their own prices. You still buy one unit for $100, and you can just buy multiples of those $100. And so some lodges have the minimum still set today at $500. Other lodges have $1,200, $1,500, or even up to $3,000 or $4,000 as their endowment price. And so on a $1,200 endowment, you're going to buy 12 units. And there's an annual return of some stipulated value. Last year was $5.37 for that $100. And so a $5 endowment was worth a little over $27.
And I think it's currently set at 5% of whatever the value is. So
Yep.
I believe that's what the current law passed last year says. So that should be a little bit more consistent going forward, rather than in the past we've had years
Absolutely.
where we paid out nothing, we paid out a little bit, or we paid out even more in some cases.
Right. And those nothing years really hurt the lodges because they had to pay the per capita on all of their members that were not per capita exempt. And that's where a lot of the concern from the lodge secretaries and the lodges gets involved with that is, hey, what if we don't make any money? We're on the hook to pay the per capita on these.
Right.
folks.
And we certainly, we're all with the lodges on that. Those years were tough years. Again, that should not happen going forward because of the new 5%. So
Right.
that alleviates a little bit of that concern that I know a lot of lodges and a lot of members have currently. Okay, so is that a good general overview, or are you ready? I think you pulled some specific lodges that you wanted to
Yep.
discuss here today. Give
So-
us some real life examples.
So a good real life example, I use my home lodge mostly because I know the most about it. It's a good average lodge. It's got about 250 members. It's not in a giant city, but it's also not in a small tiny town, which is Forest Lodge number 19 in Huntsville. We have approximately this year just over $20,000 in endowed units. And so there's a little bit of variation on how many members specifically that is, based on the different prices that we've sold
Right.
endowments at over the years. But we've got about a little over $20,000 in endowed units. And so that would pull 5% back of that every year to the lodge. Over the years, certainly in 2008, 2009, when the endowments didn't pay out, we ultimately didn't make any money that year. Every other year since the beginning of this program, the endowments that have been returned have not only paid the per capitas on the endowed members, but also paid more than that. And so they have brought a profit to the lodge outside of just breaking even on the endowments.
Now, is that due to the amount that they charged, or is that due to the number of members, or?
It's a mix of how there are. As you age out, you become a 50-year member, or you become exempt from paying per capita dues in some other way. All of that money is profitable to the lodge. It's pure profit to the lodge at that point.
Right.
But it's a mix. It is going to continue to grow, and that's a big thing that's important. Is over the years we've had mostly members that we owed per capita on every year, that we did get some endowed funds on. In 2020, that number changed for the first time, and will continue to be that way forever. Basically, we have more members that are endowed, whether they're 50-year members or they're deceased, that we're still earning money on their endowments, but the lodge isn't paying per capita on them.
Right. Okay, so a very profitable member,
Yep.
which is why you buy them in the first place.
Absolutely.
Waiting to get to that point.
Absolutely.
Obviously, we would rather you hit the 50-year mark than
Yes.
go to the Celestial
For
Lodge
sure.
earlier. But either way, once one of those two things happens,
Absolutely.
then it flips and becomes, instead of maybe losing a little bit of money in the value prop every year, it becomes a profitable thing for your lodge.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Another lodge is Park Place, number 1172 in Houston. They have the largest endowment of any lodge in the state. Their endowment is just on the north side of $350,000.
Shout out Park Place. Wow.
Yeah. So, and they started at zero, the same as everybody else did in 1980, and it's just slowly built it up over time. And it wasn't some big, huge jump other than 1 year when they jumped up a little bit. But for the most part, they've just continued to build and continue to push the program. One of the nice things about them, other than those 2 years that we paid nothing, they far and away exceeded their per capita every year. They have always been profitable.
And that will continue, as you said, right?
Yep, absolutely.
Once that trend hits the positive, barring us not paying out or something crazy, which again, we'd have to change Grand Lodge law to do that now. Seems like they're going to be on a positive trend going forward.
For sure.
Okay.
For sure. And the one last example we have is what I call the unlucky lodge, which is Louisville number 201 in Louisville, Texas.
Surprising.
And it is, when you look at their amounts of their per capitas, of their endowments, they've always gone up. They've been on a very steady upward trend. Exactly what we would want to see as that endowment continues to grow. Their endowment's just over $60,000 right now, and so it's certainly a healthy balance. I think what really kind of got to them is the young age of their members that were buying endowments. Either they weren't 50-year members, or a lot of them just tended to live a little longer, and so they've had 6 years that they didn't make their per capitas. Now, that being said, we've had this program since about 1980. It's 2022, so we've had 42 years of this. 6 of those years they didn't turn a profit, and they're the lowest lodge in the state. So
Interesting.
only 6 years out of 22, and you multiply that by the number of lodges in the state, it's been pretty profitable overall for the lodges. They've always brought home money.
And so Louisville Lodge, that was the first lodge I visited after I became a Mason, because it was on my way home. They've always had a younger membership, and I think that's probably why they've had those 6 years where they didn't. Of course, the 2 years everybody had,
Right?
Because it was zero return.
For sure.
So the other 4 years probably due to younger people buying the endowment.
Exactly.
Okay, so overall, largely profitable. Any final wrap-up thoughts on endowments in general?
One of the big things that you have to do in any kind of managed program like this, you have to manage it appropriately. The value proposition that comes with endowments, comes in 2 ways. You have the member. What's the value proposition to the member? Which is, hey, I don't have to pay dues ever again. And as a young Mason, and I was young myself when I joined, if I'd have bought an endowment my first year in, it'd have paid for itself in 6 years, and I'd have 40 plus years that I didn't have to pay dues.
Right.
And that would have been a great proposition to me. On the lodge, on the other hand, they're going to continue to pay per capita on me for 50 years. And
Right.
so it's 50 years is a long time, but when you compare it to the age of some of these lodges, like my home lodge, which is nearly 200 years old at this point,
Awesome.
that's certainly not much of anything, and it will continue to grow years and years later.
So, if you have a member that buys an endowed membership, let's say at age 18, and they buy it at the minimum amount, which is $500. So $500, 5% return now mandated. They're going to get $25 back. Per capita is at $27.50. So you're losing $2.50 on that member. Hypothetically, I think that's an opportunity cost. Hypothetically, you're losing $2.50 on that member a year for, let's say, 50 years. Let's say they're that brand new Mason, and they've got 50 years to go before they hit the 50-year mark. No longer have to pay per capita. That's $125. So the maximum you're going to lose on a member doing the endowment program is $125.
Correct.
Now on the flip side, once they hit 50 years, then within 5 years, that money's going to be back, right? $25 a year times
Absolutely.
5 years, $125, 5 years. And then in perpetuity from those 5 years for the next
You're gonna get
300 years.
$25 a year. back.
$25 a year. So that seems like a pretty good, pretty fair return
It is.
for a member. Now, one other alternative that I want to throw out there, particularly for the people who want to set the endowment really high, which I think is a mistake. I think it should be set at a reasonable level. But if you set it at $3,000, you're going to get zero endowments, which is good maybe in the short run, maybe for the next few years. But with the declining membership, that's eventually going to really hurt your lodge, I think.
Absolutely.
So I think here is another alternative, and this is my best case scenario, kind of in between. If you're interested, buy an endowment in your lodge. Take maybe 4 or 5 years after that initial outlay of money, because you got to take some time to kind of recuperate and get your money back. But then instead of paying your dues or sending in money to your secretary every year, which is here today, gone tomorrow, take that $100, like I'm taking this $100 right now, send it to your lodge, and add it to your endowment. So you add an increment to your endowment, and that takes care of that $2.50 pretty quickly.
Yep.
You could do that every year going forward, and then you're never going to leave your lodge without something behind. But at the same time, you can add to that endowment. And what if each of us who are endowed, I'm endowed in 11 lodges, so it's going to take me a while to get there. But what if each of us had $3,000, $4,000 endowment? We started at $500, and just added to it every year. Imagine what that would do. Imagine that it would be a true endowment and a true blessing for your lodge. So please consider that. Again, here today with Jeremy Johnson, the Grand Data Scientist, which does not exist, but we'll let him roll with it because he's done a lot of good work here today. Thank you for your work and for your efforts, and we appreciate it. If you have any questions, we're going to leave Jeremy's contact information in the video, so please go check that out. He just looked at me like, oh, Lord. Please go check that out and hit him up if you have any questions. He will probably be able to pull some data on your lodges. Absolutely. And get you some information should you want to present this in your home lodge. Thanks again, and we really appreciate you tuning in.